Hello, this is a tutorial on creating a mixer for the JackTrip Hub Server. And everything you need to know is right here. This is the client machine. We will also have a server machine. We'll have JackTrip running on the server, we'll have JackTrip running on the client, and they will pass audio back and forth. And so the needed component here is the mixer, and this is what not everybody knows how to do, so I'm going to go through that, and I'm going to use a Jack app compiled from Faust, a standalone app that is Jack aware, but you can use any Jack compatible mixer app. You launch it and hook it up in Jack. Jack stands for the Jack Audio Connection Kit, and it's the standard way to interconnect audio apps on Linux, but it also works fine on the Mac and on Windows, which can both do Unix kinds of things. In Windows, you use things like Cygwin, and the Mac, it's been a Unix system ever since Next Computer. BSD Unix was how Next Computer started out, and they added the Mach kernel. But anyway, let's talk about the software we're going to use today. It is QJack Control, QJackTrip, and Mixer 8, which is a simple Faust application made from one of the examples that come with the Faust distribution. So these are the instructions for how to get these components. You can download both QJack Control and QJackTrip from Aaron Wyatt's website, and I have Mixer 8 on my website. It's a very simple file, and so these you just launch, they should be fine, and then here you'll have to compile it. And to avoid using the terminal, which everyone really wants to learn how to do, because the terminal is where you have a shell, a Unix shell, and everybody should know Unix basics and be able to get around in the shell, especially in the JackTrip world. What I'm going to show you is great if it works, but if anything goes wrong, you need to get into a terminal on the Mac or a shell on Linux. What do they call it? A command window on Windows. You have to get in there and look at things. You have to do a lot of Unix commands in a shell to really find out what's going on, looking at processes, looking at ports, to debug what's going on. So I don't think it's possible to live very long in the JackTrip world without shell proficiency, Unix proficiency. So I just want to make that statement, but I'm going to try to not use the terminal except for shortcuts that aren't necessary. All right, so hopefully these instructions work for you, and if they don't, say so, and I will make a tutorial that covers this part. So let's try it. I've got these installed, and to launch them, I could go to the application launcher. But I have, just to make a little plug for, so this is a terminal running a shell. I use TCSH, which is a C shell derivative. You probably, if you're learning shells for the first time, you probably want Bash, the born again shell. It's the one that's taken over as the front runner. So let's see what my OQJ alias does. It opens QJack Control and QJackTrip. So this is open as an app, and that's just saves you time clicking around and using the Finder, using the app launcher. So I did that, and so here was the QJackTrip launch, and here is the QJack Control launch. So let's just set up our Jack server. Take the defaults, 48 kilohertz sampling rate, which is standard in the Jack community, and JackTrip community, I'm sorry, and the 256 samples per buffer. I actually normally use 64, and I know people using 32 for Raspberry Pi systems, and we'll just take the defaults here. And so now that we're not changing anything, I should also mention that we're always using Core Audio on the Mac. This is our client machine, and it's a Mac system, and so I have all these other interfaces, but choosing the default allows me to use whatever's selected as the standard system input and output. And so I've got the iMac Pro speakers, and the input is the microphone, built-in microphone. And then under Advanced, you probably don't need to change anything unless you have a link. If this is a symbolic link, you'll need to replace it with where it links to. It does not work to have a link there. And that's why this is all spelled out and says JackD MP. JackD is the Jack Audio Connection Kit daemon, and MP might be multi-process version, I'm not sure. But that's the actual name of the executable, and so there it is. I have not found it necessary to change anything else here. So here we go. Let's see if it'll just start. Starting. And you want to see the word started there. If it says active, it means there's already another one running. That's not good because it will ignore any changes you made in the setup. In particular, it'll be running at whatever frames per period was already running, and it will completely ignore this value. And that will cause trouble, especially in the main version of JackTrip that's out there that absolutely requires identical number of samples per buffer. Frames per period means samples per audio buffer. And they had to be exactly the same in the current release version of JackTrip. In the newer versions, they can just be divisors of each other, and that's okay. So now we've got our Jack server, and now I'm going to, well, I'm not going to start the client yet because there's no server. Let's go make a server. So let's go to the other machine. So I have Apple's screen sharing app here, and I'm just going to go to the other machine, and I have to wake it up, and so I've got the same instructions here. This machine is in light mode as opposed to dark mode, so you can tell easily which machine we're looking at. And here's a terminal here that we need once again just to launch, open QJack stuff, and so here comes. I don't know why that's so big. The mouse is very small over here. Let's just get out of the way. So here's Jack, and this is JackTrip, and sooner or later I'll be able to make it small. This is why I like the terminal, because in the terminal you don't have to fool around with this stuff. You don't even ever touch the mouse, right? You're just in Emacs and you're in a shell, and you have aliases for everything. So I would actually just type. Well, I'll give the terminal. If someone wants a terminal version of this tutorial, I will make one. But I'm trying to not require the terminal because I know there's a lot of people I've talked to who don't want to ever see the terminal. And when I worked at Next Computer, I was told to think like that and to regard the typical user of the Next Computer, let alone Mac computers, as not being Unix literate and not doing the terminal. And not knowing where to find it or how to run it or anything like that. But I will tell you how to run it real quick. You go to your app launcher, right? You know Launchpad, right? And then you just type in TER. Oops. Okay, this is really. See, I hate point and click. I'm faster at typing. Everybody's faster at typing. We're not chimps. We can do more than point and click. All right, so that's how you run the terminal. You just type in the first few characters. You don't have to go find it in the applications, subfolders, utilities, whatever. So here we are, and we've launched JackTrip, and we've launched the Jack Audio Connection Kit. Let's see that we've got the same sampling rate, the same samples per buffer. The path is fine. It's always worked, and so. We're not changing anything, so we cancel and we say start. We watch this word starting, and it becomes started, and that's good. We're up and running with Jack, and now JackTrip is our server, and let's say we don't need these instructions right now. I'll just move them. I want to keep the. This is another text file that's telling us that it's the hub server. I want to now start the server, but let's see what options do we have. We can change the queue buffer length to 2. There's some nice new options coming in the future. Some people recommend 4. It doesn't matter here because I'm on a local network. Everything's going to work really well. And so we have 4 modes here. So JackTrip runs in, these are the modes of this hub server. Okay, up here is where I wanted to talk about 4 modes. So you can run as a client. That's in a peer-to-peer configuration. This is a peer-to-peer server. That's just one connection with one other machine. So when it doesn't say what kind of client, what kind of server, it means peer-to-peer client, peer-to-peer server. And then there are two other modes, which are hub client and hub server. And so if you have more than two people connecting to each other, you need the hub case. And so let's suppose we're just one of many clients and we want to connect to a hub server, and now we're creating the hub server, and that's where you need a mixer. But you don't need a mixer in peer-to-peer mode. You need a mixer, well, you could, because you have two people, but you can work it out. In a hub mode, this will give you a mixer for everyone connected to that hub. So as a hub server, we have these various patching modes, server to clients, client loopback, client fan-in, but no loopback, and full mix, and no audio patching. I think I will take no auto patching because we're going to do our own patching anyway. Normally I use full mix because I want my sound coming back in the mix, time aligned, and so I'll wear noise canceling headphones if I have to in order to suppress my hearing of what I'm doing locally, because I want to hear how I integrate in the mix, time aligned. I want to know how I'm slotting in. I don't want to hear myself earlier than everybody else hears me. That's not reasonable to me. So I go for full mix and suppress local loopback as much as I possibly can, including acoustic loopback. So, but here we'll do all of our own patching. Okay, so let's see if we can start it. It says, it says hub server started. So I would normally do this with the command line, and I'll do that in a separate tutorial if anyone asks for it. And we're done with the terminal here. I just used it to replace, app launching and launch things simultaneously. All right, so let's look at our graph in Jack. So you see that we have a built-in microphone, and somewhere over here we have the system playback, so it's a single input and two outputs. And so that's just the system, right? And so the server did not create any jack ports, and that's because it does not create them until the clients exist. So as each new client connects, it will create jack ports for its input and output for all channels that it has. So let's see if we can get the client set up, but maybe I should start the mixer first. It doesn't matter, and I'm going to use the terminal again. So I'm going to just say open application. This is another alias I have. It's just an open, and you can look at, this is Unix stuff. You don't have to do this because you can just go find it and click on it, right? So it's the same thing we did before, open-a, open as an app. So OQJ, open app will open something that's an app. It'll look in all the standard directories. And I have Mixer 8, and I don't have to write .app because it knows it's looking for an app. And I have that in my ~bin directory. So that's funny. Where did it go? Let's look at ~bin mixer app. Oh, I named it mixer to be compatible. So to be compatible with the instructions that I think I might have even edited to say Mixer 8 now. Yeah, I did change that. So now I can change this app name. So we're done with the terminal. I didn't need the terminal, but I just cannot make myself get in the Finder and go browsing around and finding things to double click on. So here we are with an 8-channel mixer written in Faust. And if you need a tutorial on how I made this, that's fine. Otherwise, you should be able to just follow these instructions and make it without a terminal. So these instructions are using the Faust integrated development environment online, and you just have to get my version of the mixer, because it turns out, even though it's a standard example in Faust, if you use at the Faust IDE, you can navigate to the example mixer.dsp, and it will not compile. It's because it uses indirect file inclusion, and that is not supported by the IDE. So you have to have a completely standalone, self-contained Faust source file in the Faust IDE. And that's the price for avoiding the terminal. At the terminal, it works fine. All the include files work, everything's great. And you really should learn the terminal. You should learn Unix, and you should do it that way. But this is the terminal-free version of everything. And it's not horrible, but as soon as anything goes wrong, you've got to call in a a terminal consultant, because it's you can't do everything with point and click when the system's not working. And the system was developed by people in command lines and shells. And so here's the 8-channel mixer, and so let's now look at its jack port. So we go back to Q jack control. By the way, I keep this in the upper right corner because it is not in the applications that you can tab to. I don't understand that, but it's not a first-class application from the Mac point of view, so you can't find it that way. So you have to find it visually, and so I keep it in the upper right corner and try to never occlude it completely, because if you occlude it, you'll have to go dig it out. And so now we have, we want to look at our graph. So you always have to refresh the graph. So you have to hide it and restore it, and then you'll see what's there. And we're going to do our own patching here. We don't need the mixer connected to the audio output, because this is the audio output at the server, and it's a bunch of clients doing the music, and the server generally doesn't have music. Although you might be, this would be a good place to record, the final mix for, broadcast, or for, an archive. So you can do a lot of things with the audio on the server. But there's normally not somebody sitting there listening, because usually the server is, on some machine that's, got really fast internet that everybody can reach. It's kind of in the middle of all your clients. So if you have New York and the West Coast, you'll pick some server halfway between you and try to equalize the delay. So usually nobody's listening at the server. The hub server. I'd like to always say hub server to distinguish it from peer-to-peer server. So here we go. We're not going to use the microphone of the hub server machine, and we're not going to use its speakers, but we do need this mixer, and we want to hook it up to JackTrip. So now let's start our client. So we'll get some jack ports on our server. Okay, so here we are now on the client machine, and we have JackTrip, and let's see if we just connect. Well, let me go through the options real quick. So we'll go stereo, why not? Advanced options. This is my branch of JackTrip that has my own additions, but JackTrip has some of those, not all of them. But you can add these things. You can have reverb, and I'm going to leave reverb in there just so we can hear when it's working. It'll be more obvious. And I always use a compressor and a limiter for my outgoing stream. So this is from the client to the server. It's outgoing. You want to have some nice overflow limitation because it sounds terrible if you overflow, because it's converting from floating point to fixed point, and it does not hard clip. In the release version of JackTrip, it wraps around, and that's a very, very loud, raucous noise. And so if you're really good, you just stay below that level and everything's fine. But if you're as erratic as I am, you need a compressor, you need a limiter. Well, you need a limiter, and the compressor is just something I like, and vocalists tend to like. And the default compressor is set for vocals. If you want different compressors, you need a later version, although I'm not sure. He might be using the later version. I don't know. This is Aaron Wyatt's Q JackTrip. So let's see if there's any other options to look at. So these are the ports, and the defaults are usually fine, but they can get fouled up. And if they do get fouled up, you have to introduce an offset or reboot your computer, and you're going to probably want a terminal to find out all that stuff. Here's the queue buffer length of 4. We use the same on the server. Redundancy is, it repeats packets in order to, improve their survival rate. 16 bits is the default. Now, if you choose 32 bits, you're sending 32-bit floating point, and you don't need a limiter in that case. But it will ultimately have to go out to an audio device. So you need a limiter there at least, as you take your audio to the output on your local machine. But the standard for JackTrip is to send 16-bit audio over the internet, whereas internally it's always doing floating point. And so every time you leave JackTrip for the internet, you're clipping to 16 bits if you have to, or you're wrapping around. You're just taking a floating point, turning it into an integer, and sending out 16 bits worth. And if it overflows, too bad. And that's why you really should have a limiter on at all times. In my branch of JackTrip, the JOS branch always turns on the limiter. It's just the default. You can turn it off, but it's on by default. All right, so here's the basic options. I think we're okay. Let's just see if it'll go. It says waiting for peer, and what you want to see is received connection, and so you just wait for that. Let's look at the JackTrip window. Let's see. We do have an app icon for this. So the hub server is started. So it waited. That actually is a good thing. I think it did win. I think it did connect, but I don't hear it. Let's go. Well, we'll know if we have. We have to refresh the graph over here. Let's say we're done with the instructions for now. Sure enough, we do have the server here, and it's not wired up. There's no wiring as we asked for. All right, so let's assume it's working. It may or may not be working because I've been noticing problems where the UDP packets aren't flowing. The audio is sent over UDP. That's a network protocol that doesn't guarantee delivery of every packet. Normally on the internet you're using TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and it's guaranteed delivery. It will just keep trying until it gets through for every single packet. So now let's take our received packet. So I think of the internet audio as coming in from above to the receive port. So the received audio we're routing over to the mixer. Oh, the reason I don't hear it is we haven't hooked up any audio. So I've now sent our received audio at the server. This is the hub server machine, viewed through Apple screen sharing on a different computer. And so now the first channel of the mixer, which is stereo, has input, and now I'm going, and I don't want to play it back on the server machine. I want to send it back over the internet. So this will be the send connection, and we might start hearing something, but no, we have to check our local connections. So now why did I only hear it when I connected the second channel? Well, we'll just have to see. Okay, so I keep my volume down. I have a feedback loop between my microphone and speakers now. So you see it is channel 1. It looks like it might have just been a delay before the channel 1, or maybe it's numbered opposite the order I thought it was. But anyway, this is channel 1, which is my microphone. I'm also sending channel 2, but there's nothing in there. And then there's a stereo final output. And the reason it's driving both sides is because my pan is centered. But I can pan hard left and just have level on the left, or I can pan hard right and have only level on the right. So that's standard mixing, panning, and I've also got a level control. So here's our mixer. I can bring my channel 1 up and down as much any way I want. I'm going to bring it down a little bit because I'm going to bring in channel 2 here. These are all empty, but we're driving channel 2, but it's just not getting any information. So let's go to our graph, refresh it. So you see that the microphone, this automatically connected when I launched the client, and so the microphone just hooked up to channel 1. Now I'm sending the microphone to both channels 1 and 2, and this is JackTrip local client, the -C hub client mode. And so now you can think of these sends as going up and out the internet, and then coming over here to coming into the receive port of this hub server, and then going into the mixer, and then after the mixer it comes out and goes into the send ports of JackTrip Hub Server, and then out to the internet again, and then back into the receive ports of the local client, JackTrip, and then finally to our playback. And that's what we're listening to. And it's got reverb on it. It's got zeta rev. You can hear the reverb. And so it's got a mixer, so I can adjust the left and right channel gains, but it doesn't do anything really because it's the same signal in both. All it does is effectively pan it left or right in this environment. So that's it. Let me know what else you need. Any of these that need to be elaborated, it's very straightforward. I think maybe the next video I'll do is on how do you make this mixer, because there's plenty of ways to miss a step or run into trouble.